Good morning, guys. Welcome to this Thursday, October 16th. And so we're back up again in the overnight. So much for that crazy stuff happened yesterday. Overnight, we closed pretty much in the middle of it. We didn't hold the high ground. We looked pretty good for a second there, but no, they backed off, and then we're pretty much holding. We were holding in that 6,700 area going into the going into the overnight. And so far, the London session has done pretty well. It's been heading higher, so we're pretty much back in that same spot we were yesterday. The overnight looks strong, and then we'll see if they're going to be able to hold on to that going into the session here. So they're struggling, but they're trying to take this higher. Now, we may have news come out today. That's when an announcement from AMP came out. So I'm thinking that maybe the PPI number was scheduled for today may come out at 8:30. We just not sure, but if it does, then there may be a little bit of action there, but we'll see. So just a heads up on that one. I don't have confirmation, but I saw something from AMP come out yesterday about a potential uh, pre-announcement margin change. So I guess there's some announcement coming out or some piece of news. I would think it's the PPI number. I saw something about them rescheduling the CPI number as well coming out. I thought it was next week, but I had to go look at that again. But just be aware there may be a financial piece of news coming out here at 8:30. Other than that, starting off this, as you see, yesterday we can certainly get volatility and a half, right? Looking at what happened yesterday and they going into that 10 o'clock hour, they ran it all the way down here to the lows, all the way down here to the almost to the midpoint at 6,700. No, sorry, all the way down here to that 6650s, and before they retraced it back up again. So we can get some pretty violent actions here, just based on headlines. And all those headlines are related to China. So China comes out and says they're going to restrict some harbor activity or cooking oil or whatever it's going to be next time. But they're asserting themselves, and Trump is smacking back, and there you have it. So every time they say it's one of those standoffs, you get those kind of reactions in the market, which also are opportunities. So if you start seeing the market moving like that, uh, if you have really good news, you may be able to time the headline a little bit better. But if not, then you just kind of have to try to trade what you see when you see it. But it is if you get the early news on the headline, maybe you can catch a tail end of a move like that. So at this point, starting off again from the long side, looking for a strength. They're going to buy against this 67.30, 67.15s for rotations up. If they trade below that 15s, which is that nice ledge right there, we are on the F1. If they trade below that bound, we're going to be back range bound. So fairly aggressive at taking off the long bias. But the fact that they're trading higher now in the overnight just gives us a good reason to stay on the long side, at least to get started. But if they back off below that London close, we're taking off the long bias, going back range bound. If we get a news event come out today, a PPI number or something to that effect, that could also be a little bit of a reaction here at 8:30. So watch that 67.15. If that comes out, we are taking out the long bias. On the way up, not going to be very aggressive. I think the best short probably is at 67.40 early on here. There could be one at 67.60s. Just have to see when we get there, if we get there. But as we start heading higher, resistance kicks back in again, really at 60, almost around towards 6,800 again. But you have this attractor at 67, 60, 65. And that's where they stalled it yesterday. That could set up a nice retest trade early on today if we see the rally, if they can pull that out. But again, it's a little bit early to say. We'll see how the market reacts. But starting off on the long side, they're going to buy weakness. That's how we can get the day started. All right. Excuse me. Looking at the Nasdaq and the bonds, Bond market kind of holding on, holding above 118. So that's not completely bad. I think the flight to safety kind of holding on a bit. This volatility, given the US-China scenario, I think that's what's driving, what's moving the market primarily. Bank earnings are coming out. They're getting into earnings season. We talked about that yesterday. That's also going to be a big potential help, and lack of any government news or any news releases coming out. Earnings reports, the China situation is what's driving this right now. So, and I think that flight to safety on the bond side of things is just kind of holding on for now. But I would stay on the long side on the bonds, looking to buy weakness against the at this point against the 118.10s, 118.04s down to the 118s, or the 129 to 130s maybe, 117.29 to 117.30. Rotations back up again. The trade below this area of support, it's almost like the 118s. If the trade below that one, then we are back, retracing back in that lower range again. But starting off with a slight bias to the upside on the bonds. The Nasdaq also good showing on the Nasdaq, heading higher. And they retraded back up here, same as the ES overnight, positive overnight, time to take this higher. Let's see if they can hold on to that into the day session. We had the same scenario yesterday. Strong overnight, a little bit of pop to the upside at the open, and then they hammer it, start to take it lower. So I mean, it could very well happen exactly the same as today. But starting off on the long side, looking to buy weakness, or the aggressive trade would be at the 25.30. We are trading pretty much there right now. The 980s, I would give it one more level, 950s on the Nasdaq, but that's it. Below the 950s, we're taking off that long bias and going back range bound. So 950s takes us, and that three-letter ledge right here on the F1. And so we could very well be going back and forth here, trying to end up building value around that 24,800s, or if we're kind of halfway in between these now to trade back up in this upper distribution. So we'll see. And Nasdaq has the majority of the AI trade, so that's why it's pretty volatile. But it also has a pretty good position, a pretty good opportunity to rocket this high. Excuse me, rocket this higher. So starting off from the long side on the Nasdaq, on the short side, we just have got plenty of these single prints to retrace on the Nasdaq. So until they start getting up above that, these levels here, the 25, 200, 250s, that's when you that's when you really get well, that's when you're really on the long side of this. So if they start retracing it, we got a little bit of ways to go on the upside before they run into probably this area right here, the 25, 280s. But we kind of had to clear these resistance areas first. And first one ahead of us is going to be that 25 110s. So, but I would look for short against the 75s and the 110s. A little bit of caution since we are leaning towards the long side. I think that three-letter ledge here at the 100, 25, 100 to 110 could be a nice retest failure setting up early on. It may not hold. It may just be a small retest failure trade there. It may not be a big trade there, but it's definitely worth looking at it when it gets there. If it gets there. You never know. You never know. So both ES and Nasdaq starting off on the long side. Let's see how strong that overnight really is, if they're going to be able to hold on to these moves to the upside. Finally, oil and gold. And gold is up again. It's almost like a broken record, up, 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 up. But that run is gonna come to an end at one point, and it's nothing but pretty spectacular. Holding gold, you're smiling, but it's it feels pretty overextended. So doesn't mean it can't go higher. That means that it's just trading with a bit of caution. If you're holding gold as an asset, selling some and taking some profit off the table would be probably prudent, but If you're trading it, it doesn't really matter. We just trade it as we see it. But I would start off on the long side, looking to buy against the 42.50s, 42.30s, 42.25s down to that 42.15s, rotations back up again. If the trade below that 42.25s, 26s, I would probably take off the long bias and go back to range bound. That's now back in this lower range again. Still looking to buy against the 16s or 7s down to the 95s. Still looking to buy against those areas, but not as aggressively. It's just at that point they're backing off a little bit more, and you want to see if they're going to stay on an upwards trajectory. So and on this, and not going to be aggressive on a short shot on gold. I have not traded gold for a bit. Sometimes I take a gold trade, but that usually is if I see a really good opportunity. But this is pretty volatile situation. Volatile. It is pretty volatile. The little small bars here is like 60 up to 64. So each of these little bars here are like 40, 50 ticks. That's how big it is. So you have to just take this trade with a bit of caution. But if you have a good retest failure setting up, you can certainly get in on if you can get in and stick with a gold trade and it start running in the direction, you'll be smiling. That is a pretty good. It runs harder than the Nasdaq does when it moves. But it is a finicky market, so just trade that with caution. And on oil, we are pretty much holding below that 59s and not being able to really get back above it. So 59 is for the overnight stalled. So I would just stay on the range bound with a bias to the downside, looking to sell strength at 59s, 59.30s, up to that 59.75s for rotations back down. Maybe up to the 60s too. If they trade above 60, I think we may have a shot at retracing to 63 again. But at this point, I think the trajectory is going to be to the downside, unless the Middle East has an issue. As you've seen the images or the heard the news about how the Hamas is trying to reassert power in the strip again. So if they don't disarm, I think that's going to flare up again as they get disarmed. So that could potentially run oil right back up again. But we'll see. That area of the world is pretty volatile still. So trade gold. So trade oil range bound with a bias to the downside. Trade gold from the long side, and that's how we get started on both of those. Back to the ES. And we got about 10 minutes left before we potentially get some news. But I saw that pretty, let me see if I see that announcement. Yeah, so until further notice, at the list, so yeah, there's some kind of a news release coming out on at 8:30. Oh, it could be the further release. It could be CPI, PPI coming out. Both of them could maybe coming out. That's what it says here on their little announcement. So, no, hang on a second. I'm looking at, they have a different calendar here. So, looks like they're getting PPI today, and then we're going to get CPI tomorrow. No, 24th. Sorry, 24th. That's what it is. So we're getting PPI at 8:30, and then we're going to get the CPI on Friday the 24th. So that's the news coming out right now. So only PPI coming out today, and then we'll see how the market reacts to that. That should be a welcome little change, a little bit of news coming out here in about 10 minutes. All right, guys, we'll wrap it there for now. I'll see you back at 11:30 for the next update. So good trading, guys, and I'll see you back then.